My name is Trudy Kimball. I am 67 years old, and I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the same house my husband and I bought in 1991, on a street that dead ends at a drainage culvert and smells like cut grass every Saturday from May through October. Last February, I put $19,800 on my visa to reserve Ridgecrest Lodge, 7-bedroom private mountain house outside Gatlinburg, for a family reunion I'd been planning since before my husband Walter died. My daughter-in-law, Heather, looked across my kitchen table the following April and said, with the kind of calm a person uses when the decision is already filed away, "I just don't think there's going to be a comfortable spot for you on this trip." She said it the way you decline a second cup of coffee, politely, firmly, without a tremor. She had given my room to her mother. My son Roger sat right beside her and studied the grain of the table. But here's what Heather didn't understand about me. I spent 28 years as a paralegal at a property law firm. I have read more rental agreements, lease addenda, and contract modification clauses than most people read novels. I know where the weight lives in a sentence. And when I drove home that night with Walter's old camera bag on the passenger seat, I wasn't sad. I was as precise. What happened when they pulled up to that mountain lodge? 6 weeks later is the reason I'm telling you this story. Welcome to Brave Mom Stories. This channel was built for moments like this one, for the times when being patient gets mistaken for being passive, and someone important decides to find out the difference. If this one stays with you, drop a comment and subscribe. I'd love to have you here. Walter James Kimball was born in 1954 in Morristown, Tennessee. He taught high school earth science at Bearden High School in Knoxville for 31 years. He had a beard he trimmed on the first Sunday of every month, a thermos he'd owned since 1987, and a Nikon F3 camera he bought used from a colleague and never upgraded because, he said, the camera wasn't the point. The eye was the point. Walter photographed everything: wildflowers, storm clouds, the underside of creek rocks after a hard rain. He kept contact sheets in manila envelopes, sorted by year in a filing cabinet in the spare bedroom, floor to ceiling. 30 years of images organized the way he organized his gradebook, by date, by location, by light condition. The Smoky Mountains were his religion. We lived 45 minutes from the park boundary, close enough to drive up on a Sunday and be back for dinner, which we did, often until the kids were grown and the Sundays got busy. He called the Smokies the best classroom on the planet. He meant it the way he meant everything, completely, without irony. He wanted to take the whole family up there for a week, not a day trip. A week, in a real house with a porch facing the ridge, where the grandchildren could wake up to fog in the valley and fall asleep to owls in the dark. He said it every summer for the last 6 years of his life. Next year, when Clara's old enough to really appreciate it. Next year, when work settles down. Next year, after the roof. Walter was diagnosed with a brain tumor in March of 2023. He was gone by the following January. 10 months from the first headache to the funeral. We did not go to the Smokies. 3 weeks after the service, I was going through the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom, not to erase him, just to see what was there. And I found a small spiral notebook wedged between 2 envelopes labeled Smokies, Fall, 2018. The notebook had a sticky note on the cover in Walter's handwriting, the small, looping letters I knew better than my own. Family trip. Ridgecrest areas. 7 nights. Look into lodges. He had a list of things to photograph. Black bear tracks in mud. Sunrise over Klingman's Dome. Clara's face when she sees her first elk. He'd written Clara's name on that list before she was old enough to know what an elk was. He'd been planning a trip she didn't know was planned for her. I sat on the floor next to the cabinet for a long time. Then I put the notebook in my purse, and I've carried it with me ever since. I worked at Callaway and Marsh Property Law from 1994 to 2022. My title was Senior Paralegal, which meant I reviewed every contract before an attorney touched it. Leases, purchase agreements, vacation rental contracts, property management addenda. I knew which clauses were standard and which ones were landmines. My supervising attorney, Bernard wore the same gray blazer Monday through Thursday and a slightly different gray blazer on Fridays, and he used to drop a contract on my desk without a word, and I'd have a memo on his chair before he finished his second cup of coffee. Bernard retired in 2019. I retired in 2022, but the habit of reading everything before signing anything, that doesn't leave with the job. That becomes the way you move through the world. Roger Allen Kimball is my only child. He is 43 years old and works as a financial analyst in Atlanta. He calls on Sunday evenings, usually around 7, usually for about 12 minutes. He asks how I'm doing. I say fine. He tells me about work. I ask follow-up questions. He answers briefly. Then he says he should go. I started timing the calls the spring after Walter died, when I noticed they had a script. Roger is not a bad person. He is tired and stretched thin, and has spent 11 years in a household where Heather manages the decisions, and his role is to support them. After Walter died, Roger came down for the service and stayed 4 days. We sat in the living room 2 evenings in a row and talked the way we used to. Long, real talking, following the conversation wherever it went. Then he went back to Atlanta. Heather told me gently that Roger needed to focus on their family's stability right now. I understood what she meant. I understood exactly what she meant. Heather was 39 and ran a boutique event planning company from their house in Buckhead. She was capable. She was organized. She planned her own wedding reception in 8 weeks and came in $1,200 under budget. I told her I admired that at the rehearsal dinner, and I meant it. Over the years, I pieced together something about Heather that no one had told me directly. Her mother, Inez, had raised her alone from the time Heather was 16. After her father left on a Thursday morning with no warning and did not come back, Inez had worked double shifts for 3 years to keep the lights on in their apartment in Macon. Heather had grown up watching her mother be made invisible by people with more resources. Somewhere along the way, she had decided, privately and permanently, that no one was going to use money to have power over her family. She looked at my generosity, the birthday checks, the savings account I opened for Clara, the way I picked up dinner tabs without being asked. And she didn't see love. She saw a transaction. She was fighting a ghost from her mother's story, and she was fighting it in my kitchen, against me, and I didn't know for years that's what was happening. By the time I understood it, the shape of things was already set. Clara John Kimball turned 10 last November. She is quiet and deliberate and has Walter's habit of going still when she's thinking. She collects things she finds outside. Feathers, interesting rocks, a jay's nest she transported home in a shoebox. Last Christmas, she asked for a field guide to Appalachian wildlife. I gave her 2, plus a small pair of binoculars I found at a camera shop downtown. She texted me a thank you that was 3 sentences long and specific about which bird she'd already tried to identify. That's Clara. Lucas is 7 and made entirely of motion and sound. He crashes into my legs when I arrive and announces everything he's been thinking since the last time I visited in one continuous sentence. He calls me Nana. He draws me pictures of dinosaurs driving school buses. My refrigerator is half covered in his work. I have not taken any of it down. February 12th. I sat at my kitchen table with my reading glasses, a yellow legal pad, and my laptop. I found the Ridgecrest Lodge listing on a vacation rental platform, read every word of the property description and house rules, and then opened the rental agreement PDF. 19 pages. I printed all 19 and read them the way I used to read at the firm, slow, highlighter in one hand, pen in the other. On page 8, section 4.2, I found the clause I recognized immediately from a dozen similar documents, primary guest authority. The primary guest named on this reservation holds exclusive authority to approve changes to the guest list, room assignments, or reservation details. Modifications by any other party are not valid without written confirmation from the primary guest on record. I was the primary guest, Trudy Ann Kimball, visa ending in 6203. I highlighted the clause in yellow. In the margin, in Walter's old red pen, the one he used to mark his photography contact sheets, I wrote, "Primary me." I filed the agreement in a manila folder and labeled the tab Ridgecrest, June 2025. Then I put it in the desk drawer and made coffee and looked at the ridge visible from my kitchen window and thought about the list in Walter's notebook. I shared the lodge details with the family in late February: bedroom assignments, trail recommendations, the junior ranger program at the park for the kids, a link to the trail Walter had photographed in 2018 and always called the one worth doing first. I sent it with the subject line: Walter's mountain trip, finally happening. By the first week of March, Heather had created a shared planning folder. She renamed it Kimball Family Retreat 2025. Walter's name was gone. She reorganized the bedrooms. She replaced my trail recommendation with one she found on a travel blog. She moved me out of the main floor master suite, the room with the wraparound porch access and the view of the main ridge, and placed Inez in it instead. I found out by accident. Clara mentioned it on a video call in April, the way children mention facts they don't know are loaded. Grammy, my dad said your room got switched. I asked which room I'd been moved to. She checked something off screen. She gave me a number. It was a small interior room on the 3rd floor, no window view, across the hall from the laundry. I drove to Atlanta for Easter. After dinner, when Roger had taken Zukas to bed and Clara was reading in the corner with her field guide, I asked Heather directly. She set down the dish she was rinsing, turned and looked at me the way she looked at estimates she was about to decline. She said her mother hadn't had a real vacation in years, and the main floor suite made more sense for her because of Inez's knee. Then she paused and looked at me more carefully and said, I just don't think there's going to be a comfortable spot for you on this trip. Flat, decided, like a door closing in a building where she owned all the keys. Roger came back downstairs. He saw both of our faces. He picked up his phone. I drove back to Knoxville with Walter's camera bag on the passenger seat. 3 hours on I-75. I talked to the bag the way I sometimes talk to the house when it was empty, which it always was. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was done talking. I went to my desk. I opened the drawer. I pulled out the manila folder. Primary guest authority. Written confirmation from the primary guest on record. I picked up the red pen. I started making notes the way I made notes at the firm for 28 years. Specific, dated, factual, without emotion, which is the most efficient container for anger I've ever found. The next morning at 8:45, I called the rental management company and asked to speak with someone about an unauthorized modification to my reservation. The representative who answered was named Terrence. He pulled up the account and confirmed that bedroom assignments had been changed by a secondary user. Someone I had added to the reservation in February for communication purposes on March 9th. I told him I had not authorized those changes. I told him Section 4.2 of the rental agreement made clear that modifications by secondary users without written confirmation from the primary guest were not valid. He put me on hold. When he came back, he had a supervisor named Diane on the line. Diane confirmed the modification log. No written authorization from the primary guest on file. I told her I wanted to formally document that these changes were made without my consent, and that if the reservation was not returned to its original configuration in writing by a specific date, I would be filing a credit card dispute on the grounds that the services I contracted for had been materially altered without my authorization. She went quiet for a moment. People who work in property management recognize that sentence. They know what follows it. That afternoon, I called the credit union where I've kept my accounts for 34 years. I explained the situation without editorializing. I paid $19,800 for a vacation rental reservation that designated me as primary guest with exclusive authority over room assignments. A secondary user, without my written authorization, modified the reservation and reassigned my room to another party. I was subsequently informed by the secondary user that there was, in her exact words, no comfortable spot for me on a trip I had paid for. The service I had contracted for had been materially altered without my consent. I referenced Section 4.2 of the rental agreement and the modification log Terrence had documented. The representative opened a dispute. Case number CU 2025-8847, Provisional credit of $19,800 pending investigation. The rental company would be notified. The reservation would be suspended. Then I called the rental platform back. I booked a separate cabin on the same Ridgecrest property complex. 1 bedroom, full kitchen, east-facing porch. Available the same week. $2,900. Different card. Booking confirmed immediately. If someone has ever handed you a bill for something they took from you and told you to be grateful about it, stay with me. Because what happened at the Ridgecrest Lodge check-in on June 25th is the part that makes the whole story worth telling. Like, if you've been there, I'll see you on the other side of it. The next 5 weeks, I was quiet. The family group chat was not. Heather posted a carpool schedule, a suggested packing list with color-coded categories, a link to a dinner cruise in Gatlinburg. Inez posted a photo of brand new hiking shoes with the tag still on. Roger liked every post. Nobody asked me a single question about the trip I had booked and paid for. I made my own preparations. I reread the Appalachian Field Guide cover to cover. I booked a guided sunrise photography walk at the park. 1 spot for 1 person, morning of the 28th. I ordered a new strap for Walter's Nikon because the original had cracked along the buckle. I called the Arts Center on the UT campus where Walter had given a photography workshop the year before he got sick. I spoke with their development coordinator about establishing an endowment in a deceased donor's name. She walked me through the structure. Initial contribution, annual grant awards, eligibility criteria, the Walter James Kimball Fund for Nature Photography. Awards for young photographers, ages 10 to 18, pursuing Appalachian subjects. I wrote Clara's name in the spiral notebook with a small question mark. She'd earn it on her own, or she wouldn't. But the door would be there. 3 weeks before departure, I drove down to Clara's school in Atlanta for her science fair. She had a poster on bird migration patterns in the Appalachian corridor, hand-drawn maps, documented with a photograph she'd taken herself. A cedar waxwing at a backyard feeder, in focus, well-composed, the branch clean against a gray sky. I stood in front of that poster for a long time. A woman next to me said the bird one was her favorite. I told her the photographer was my granddaughter. She said Clara must get it from someone. I said she does. After the fair, Clara found me near the gym exit. She was still wearing her name badge. She had Walter's eyes, brown, steady, taking everything in before she speaks. "Nana," she said, "are you coming to the mountains?" I bent to her level. I told her I'd be there. I promised. I didn't explain the details. I just promised. She hugged me once, the way Walter hugged, brief, firm, no preamble, and went to find her parents. That hug was what kept me from pulling back the dispute for the next 3 weeks, every time I came close to it. The dispute resolved on June 14th. Written notice from the credit union. Provisional credit confirmed. $19,800. Rental company notified. Reservation RG 2025-4471. Status suspended. A small padlock icon in the portal where the check-in button used to be. My own reservation, RG 2025-623, showed green. Confirmed. If you have ever been written out of something you built, stay with me. Subscribe if you want to see this through. I promise it's worth it. June 25th. The Ridgecrest Complex check-in office sits at the bottom of a gravel road off Route 321, just past a pie shop that opens at 7. I arrived at 1:15. 1 bag. Walter's camera around my neck. The spiral notebook in my carry bag, red pen clipped to the outside pocket. The woman at the desk had reading glasses on a beaded chain and a long gray braid. She scanned my confirmation. Green immediately. Cabin 6, Clearwater. Follow the gravel road past the main lodge, take the left fork, sign at the clearing. The cabin was board and batten, set back from a clearing with a view of the main ridge. East-facing porch, exactly the way Walter always described. Morning light on those mountains, he used to say, is the reason the Cherokees stayed as long as they did. I set my bag inside, opened the porch door. The mountains sat the way they always sit, patient, enormous, green, layered on green, a column of wood smoke rising somewhere in the next cove. I set Walter's Nikon on the porch railing. "We made it, Walter." At 3:15, my phone began to ring. Roger, then Heather, then Roger twice more. I let them go. The family's reservation would have looked like this at the main lodge check-in desk. The woman with the braid, a barcode scan, a screen showing the wrong color. Reservation suspended pending billing dispute filed by the primary guest of record. Unable to process check-in until dispute is resolved or primary guest reauthorizes charges. The primary guest was 3/10 of a mile away on a porch facing east, drinking the end of her travel coffee. At 4:30, I heard tires on the gravel. A car came up the left fork and stopped in the clearing. Roger got out alone. He walked to the porch steps and stopped at the bottom. He looked at me the way he used to look at problems he couldn't solve. Like the answer was obvious, and he was embarrassed it had taken him this long. "Mom!" "Roger. She says you did this on purpose." I filed a billing dispute for a reservation modified without my written authorization, in violation of the rental agreement I signed. The reservation was suspended by the rental company, pursuant to their standard policy. I don't control their process. He came up the steps and sat on the top one. He turned off his car with the key fob from where he sat. We listened to the woods, a woodpecker working somewhere deep in the cove, the ridge going gold along the eastern face. "I should have said something at Easter," he said, "when she said that to you." I let it sit. I did not rush toward it. "I should have," he said again, quieter. I reached into my carry bag and pulled out a white envelope with his name on it in Walter's red pen. "This has the details for the Walter James Kimball Fund at the UT Arts Center," I said. "The $1,900 I paid for this lodge has been redirected into a nature photography grant for young photographers in the Appalachian region." I paused. "Clara will be eligible to apply next year." He took the envelope. He turned it over. He opened it slowly and read the letter. And when he reached Walter's name on the fund title, he stopped reading and looked at the ridge the way Walter used to look at things he wanted to memorize. He was quiet for a long time. "Roger," I said finally, "I love you. I will always love you. But I will not pay for a family that doesn't have room for me, and I won't behave as though that's a reasonable thing to be asked to accept." He looked back down at the letter. He looked at Clara's eligibility note. He nodded once, the small certain nod that meant something had landed and would stay landed. Before he left, he asked if he could bring Clara in the morning. "Just her." I said yes. I told him to have her bring the binoculars. He drove back up the fork. I stayed on the porch until the light left the ridge completely, and the cove filled with the sound of frogs starting up in the dark below. 3 mornings later, I went on the guided sunrise walk at the park. 7 of us on a trail Walter had listed in his notebook, following a ranger named Dale up to an overlook that caught the first light off the eastern peaks. A bull elk was grazing on the far slope. Walter's Nikon was around my neck. I took the photograph I thought he would have taken. The elk half hidden in mist, the dark layered ridgeline behind, the light just catching the top of the tree line in a way that lasted about 40 seconds before the angle changed. I looked at it on the viewfinder screen. He would have said the light was perfect. He would have been right about that. I printed the photograph when I got home and framed it. It sits on the mantel now, next to Walter's school portrait from his last year at Bearden, the one where his beard is slightly uneven because he'd trimmed it on a Sunday he was rushing. 2 photographs. The man, the mountain he never got to stand on, taken with his own camera by the eye he trained. Clara sent something in the mail 12 days after we all got home. A drawing on heavy paper, the 2 of us on a mountain porch, stick figures, binoculars around both our necks. She'd drawn a bird above us with wings fully spread, detailed in a way that told me she'd referenced her field guide before she drew it. On the back, "Next time we go together. Nana. Love, Clara." No question about whether there would be a next time. Just the assumption that there would be, and a plan for it. Walter all over again. Heather has not called me. I did not expect her to yet. Some distances don't close in a week. What matters is whether people are still moving toward the closing, however slowly, however imperfectly. Roger's Sunday calls resumed 3 weeks later. The first one back lasted 19 minutes. 7 longer than the old average. He told me Lucas had found a salamander under a rock on their second day and carried it in his cupped palms for 20 minutes before Roger convinced him to set it free. He told me Clara had used the binoculars every single morning from the porch of whatever cabin they'd managed to rebook last minute. He didn't mention Heather. I didn't ask. That too has its own time and its own terms. I still have Walter's notebook in my carry bag. The sticky note on the cover, family trip, Ridgecrest area, 7 nights. At the bottom of his list, below Clara's face when she sees her first elk, below sunrise over Klingman's dome, I added one line in his red pen, Clara on the east porch, binoculars. Next year. Walter used to say the best photographs are the ones you plan so long and so carefully that when the moment finally comes, the camera is almost beside the point. The image is already there. All you have to do is show up. Here is what 28 years of reading contracts taught me. The people who skip the fine print are always the most surprised by what's inside it. Heather thought my patience was permission. She thought quiet meant weak and careful meant slow. But patience is just strategy with a longer timeline. And I have spent 3 decades knowing exactly where to look for the language that matters. Some habits earn their keep every single time.